TechDays 2011. Thanks for taking the time to join us. Thanks for taking your time off busy projects. We know you are all billable, so thanks to your managers as well. I would really like to welcome you, and let's kick this event off. Now, before handing it over to Scott Hanselman, our keynote speaker, I would like to take a few minutes and take you back in time for taking a look at Microsoft, at TechDays, at the event, and at us, all of us developers. So if you take Microsoft, Microsoft is this very big corporation now, but in essence, what I want to explain to you during these few minutes is that we are all developers, and we're still developers after all these years. So, taken 1975, when Microsoft was founded, Bill Gates and Paul Allen were two childhood friends. They had something in common. They had a passion for programming. So they were building their. So Bill Gates was building the interpreter for a basic interpreter for the first real hobbyist microcomputer. And they were showing it off on a simulator, not on the actual computer, because it wasn't ready in time. So, you know, really the developer mind at work. So they developed this for the, so they developed Altair Basic for the MITS, the first microcomputer, as you could say. So once they founded a company, of course the company grew quite exponentially. Later, with MS-DOS, the distribution of the OS on the actual PC, the IBM personal computer, the company grew even more. And so in the years that passed, that went on, the company was growing even more. With Windows 95, I think everyone knows how big that launch was as well. And if we look forward the years after that, if we skip into the year 2000, for example, where we had the launch of Windows 2000, by then Microsoft had about 45,000 employees. Now, with this big company, years later, we had a big campus, or we still have a very big campus in Redmond, the headquarters. Now, this is not just one big building. It's actually, if you go there, the first time you arrive in a kind of a village. I really call it a village. So it's a huge company. It's doubled the number of employees in the last 10 years. But if you look, it's still a lot of developers and engineers. I mean, that's what really makes Microsoft. And you could say Microsoft is the most successful ISV out there, because in essence, we are an independent software vendor. We're a big independent software vendor, but we are an ISV. And with the 400 branches that we have worldwide, the Belgian branch and all the other branches are working on ways to reach out to you, developers, to all of you. And with the ways that we communicate differently, that you consume information differently, we try to find ways to adapt and to get the information from Redmond, from the engineers, from the expert in the community as well, to you, and have you heard at our center as well. And this is the reason why we started doing the developer and IT Pro Days, as we then call them. To start with, we started with Developer Days in 2003. So almost 10 years ago, the first edition was really one way that the local team found to get you the information directly from Redmond, get you in touch with the people from Redmond and from the community, international and nationally. So by then we had Visual Studio 2003, seems logical, in the year 2003. And if we continue, we had, like in 2005, we had Bill Gates himself present a keynote at the event. And by then, people from the local team started blogging. So another way, again, to reach out to you, to embrace those new ways of communication. That's what we try to do with every event that is coming, and every event in the past 10 years. So in 2005, we were talking, well, Visual Studio 2005, pretty logical. We were talking Windows Forms, we were talking Windows Mobile 5.0. We were also, I remember one of the sessions was called The Future of Web Development. And I think that really sounds very familiar for something that you might see in the agendas, not specifically today, but in the events today as well. So the future is always the future. Let me go a bit forward to 2008, 2010. So if we look at the event in 2007, we started recording the sessions so that you, once you go home, you also have the sessions on a DVD close to you to get that information to you. So we keep looking at ways to get the information to you, to get the speakers closer to you, to get connection. And if we fast forward a bit to 2010 and then 2011 today, well, the conference, we still keep evolving the ways that we reach out to you. For example, we stopped sending out DVDs with the recordings last year in 2010. Well, this year, tomorrow, this session, this keynote will be online on Channel 9. You will be able to see Scott Hanselman again on Channel 9. Next week, the keynote and all the other sessions will be put online as well. So you will have the information at your fingertips because you now consume information online. In the build-up of this event as well, we are embracing new ways of communication. We use social networks, we use LinkedIn, we use Twitter. We have a lot of people contacting us through the social media channels. And for the first time, you could also use the pay with a tweet capability to get extra discount in the early bird phase. So we try to use the old communication ways, but embrace those new communication ways you're using as well. And it might be no surprise to you that Microsoft is actually one of the most active companies on social media. You also have been in touch with a lot of the speakers directly through those new communication ways. And we're still innovating. We try to do even better. So this year, for the first time, you will be able to give the feedback about this session, maybe right now already, about what you feel about the top sessions, what you feel about something that's really good or you don't like. General feedback, just an application that you'll be able to use throughout this event. So we keep embracing new ways of engaging with you. And that's really what we try to do as a company and what we are going for. You as developers are also changing. Maybe 10 years ago you were using one framework, one Microsoft or two Microsoft frameworks. Today you kind of mix some open source frameworks. Well, Microsoft itself is also doing open source. We're doing a lot of interop. We're also, if you look at Windows Azure, our cloud platform, we embrace .NET, but we also embrace PHP and Java and other technologies. So the world is really changing, and if we as a company don't evolve with that, it's not a good evolution. So we evolve together with the rest of the world, the rest of the community. And what really makes us all stick together in a group, what makes us unique is the fact that we are developers. The experts out there, the local experts, the international experts, the speakers, all of you, I think the essence is we have our IT in our DNA. And that's really what makes us stick. And which is a perfect introduction for our keynote speaker, Scott Hanselman. Scott Hanselman certainly has IT in his DNA. No one is going to doubt that. And you could also say he's kind of a social media celebrity. He won't like that, but I think he is. And so it's a really big honor and pleasure to invite Scott Hanselman on stage, community architect. Scott.
All right, thank you very much. That was very good. Hi, everybody. Silence. Welcome to Belgium. My name is Scott Hanselman, and thank you, Katrien, for such a wonderful introduction. This idea of IT in our DNA really resonates with me. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and trying to make a keynote that's a little bit more fun than your usual keynotes. I definitely started at a very early age. Of course, I work for Microsoft. I have a blog. I have a podcast. I would encourage you to check out my new podcast called This Developer's Life. I do with Rob Connery. It's all new. Please check it out, This Developer's Life. Here's some pictures of me coding classic ASP, some of my early work. I started out very early in computers, doing things in VI and in Emacs. I did C. Actually, one of my very first jobs was translating a C program from English into French and then to Japanese. This is true, not a joke. Many, many years ago. I'm very, very, very old. I have dyed my hair so you don't see my gray hair. I started on things like Desk View and OS2. I'm sure some of the folks here did the same. I used such wonderful tools as NT 3.1 and SQL 4.2.1. I did this. Remember these days when you could move windows around with ASCII? Those are the bad old days. Then I got a flat screen monitor. I was pretty excited about that. Because at this point, though, Microsoft's strategy was to get developers young with VB. So I wanted to start doing things like Visual Basic, so I started using VB3. And I assume some of the people here have done the same thing, using VB. So I'll show you a little bit of what that was like. Let's go down here and look at where we started. I'm running Windows 7, of course, on this particular machine, but that doesn't mean that I can't get back to the good old days. These were the days, my friends. This is VB3. Let me see. In order to make this look like a real Visual Basic application, there we go. One of my good friends, Chrissy here, has told me he'll give me chocolates if I show as much Visual Basic in the keynote as possible. So I'm just doing this for the chocolates. There we go. This looks like a proper enterprise application that has been written in Visual Basic, I think. This is actually running in, what are we running this in? Virtual PC seamless mode. I was very excited to find out that VB3 still runs in Windows 7, since we have so many programs that we need to support that are running on VB3. I licensed it to myself. Fortunately, on this machine, I have 8 megabytes of RAM, so I should have just enough to run Visual Basic. This is a silly thing now, but so many really great applications were written in Visual Basic at the time. Whether they were in green and purple or not doesn't matter. There's even still VB6 applications that are probably in this country being worked on. What was exciting about it was this concept of dragging and dropping. It was an extremely powerful concept. And I think that when people pick on web forms and some of the web forms applications that were written out there, they forget why web forms was created. This idea of dragging a button, double-clicking on it, and saying button click was huge. And you saw it in MFC, you saw it in Delphi, you saw it again and again. And this concept is still around. It's abstracting away complexity. A Hello World application in VB3 could be created in literally seconds, while the similar Hello World application using only C, if you ever read Charles Petzold's book, Programming Windows 3.1, Hello World was 93 lines of code. So after VB3 and VB6, when ASP.NET came out, we introduced this event model on top of a stateless protocol like HTTP, thereby making the web accessible to a huge number of people that it would not have been available to. It's pretty powerful. Of course, the applications were easy to build, but they were easy to make ugly. And this was a problem. But I think you know that there are some really great Visual Basic 3 and Visual Basic 6 applications out there. Maybe you wrote some of them. There was nothing about VB6 and VB3 that made it inherently evil or that made it easy to write bad programs. Bad programmers write bad programs. It wasn't VB's fault that you could make applications look like this. And I'm surprised that we look back on such amazing accomplishments like Visual Basic 3 and Visual Basic 5 and 6 with such disdain, and we say, man, that was crap. Now we've got the good stuff. We'll use the new technology. You can write crap in really any language. I'm surprised. So then as time goes on, I get my first MSDN subscription. And the sum of all knowledge in the world was contained in these 2 books. There was no way to get online, so really it was this. If the information wasn't in those books or in those CDs, then the information didn't exist. Then a little later, I got on CompuServe. And then things started to be really, really interesting. I think I was like 0000,0002 at CompuServe. It's very early involved in CompuServe. You could go up and you could tap into the knowledge of the community, and things started getting really, really interesting. And then classic ASP came along. And see, this always makes me incredibly sad about the status of the community, that no one laughs at that joke. I was thinking if I could say enter the ninja, or maybe line feed the ninja, and you would think that was funny. But character 13 the ninja doesn't get a laugh at all. It's really tragic. I hope you guys know what that meant and didn't need me to explain it to you. Let's go back over here and take a look at the totally classic experience. Check this out. Remember this? InterDev. Woohoo! Like a cheer. Was that a cheer? A spontaneous cheer for InterDev? Let's look at some of the magic that was InterDev. I put the call out on Twitter yesterday for really awesome code that people had written in the past. So I'm pretty excited to share with you some just epic code. If you are pregnant or if you are easily nauseous, please turn your eyes away from the screen. I don't want to make anyone ill. I mean, I think my entire career was based on writing code like this. And then, of course, the giant 50-line switch statement. Classic ASP, though, paid for my first house. And it made it possible for a whole new class of people to create applications. But again, it's a technology that we look back on and we say, look at this garbage. What were we thinking? This is awful. These people, again, they think of this as the bad old days. And I think that's really unfortunate. So I got more MSDN CDs. I was actually in Zimbabwe, and I had seen a mobile, like you hang it on the rear view mirror. And I was driving and it was a big cab in the middle of nowhere. We were going into the rural areas, and the man had made a mobile hanging from his window in MSDN CDs. They're everywhere. I've seen them in wallpaper, literally on the wall, covering a wall, like a brick wall with just MSDN CDs. But when the information you need is not in the MSDN CD, and even Don Box can't save you, you would go to this new thing, this new interesting beta thing called Google. This is the original homepage from 1998. And then things started getting really interesting. I could share my really bad code with other people. And then ASP.NET came along. I showed this to Phil Hack, and he thought it was the first airbender. And I said, no, well, maybe if there's only one airbender, then he could be the first and the last airbender. But he should go back and relearn how his array indexing works. So I thought I would show you Web Matrix, because everyone's talking about Web Matrix lately. So this is the original Web Matrix in version 0.5. This was when .NET was just starting up. And back in these days, we could write amazing code like this. I mean, it's almost like reading one of the great epic poems, like Shakespeare. The part that kills me is that not only was it nightmarish code, it was just some of the worst code ever, but we totally understood it. We totally knew what we were doing. Let me see if there's some inline tables. Oh, yes. This is awesome. Hang on. I got to zoom in. This is too good. Look at that. And of course, there's probably some non-breaking spaces in there and a few 1-pixel GIFs. I was the king of the table plus 1-pixel GIF. I could do anything with a 1-pixel GIF. I've even seen for loops like for I equals 1 to 1,000, image source equals 1-pixel GIF. Someone making a 1,000-pixel wide thing of 1-pixel GIFs rather than just making the width 1,000. Here's also some extremely disgusting code that I want to show you that may surprise you. What language do you think this is written in? Guy said JSP? That would be too nice to the Java people if you said that. This is Rails. This is Ruby. You can write crap in any language. So I really think it's funny that we're so picking on the old building blocks that we used to work on, that we pick on classic ASP, we pick on ASP.NET web forms, and now you hear people talking about things like web matrix, the new web matrix, and they say, oh no, it's classic ASP all over again. Inline SQL, it's going to be awful, it's going to be crap. And here's some Ruby code. It's the programmer more than it is the programmer's tools. But ultimately what happened with Microsoft is too many of the wrong size Lego pieces. In the US we say Legos, and every time I say that in a keynote I get 15 tweets. No, it is Lego, which is always singular. I have Lego, I love Lego, we have many Lego. Okay, sorry that I hurt your feelings. And when I say by wrong size Legos is that I always get an idea of what I want things to look like, and that never quite turns out right. I think to myself, I'm going to build this, and it's going to be freaking awesome, and I build that. Is it the Lego's fault? Or is it my fault, or maybe a little of both? Well, Microsoft released a lot of weirdly shaped Lego pieces. Lego purists will tell you that if you're going to build like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars, that it's not fair to use the pieces that are perfectly shaped like the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. The purists say you must use appropriately sized Lego pieces. Don't cheat with all those custom pieces. Microsoft released lots of funny shaped Legos, big ones and small ones, things that didn't fit together, things that didn't work together at all. Things for children. Things that were impossible to use. Did anyone ever actually successfully build that car? I know that I saw that ad in like 1982 and I bought that car, but I never actually put it together. But with all fairness though to SharePoint and to WCF, both of them are just examples at the time that they came out of Lego pieces that weren't quite the right size. SharePoint was very coarse and very large. WCF was very small, almost too small and too difficult to configure. And you started to feel like this, which would then, of course, lead you to this. And makes me start feeling bad about Microsoft. How smart do I have to be? Do I have to be this smart in order to build something with a Microsoft product? Well, having hope that maybe if I study harder or I try harder, that things will be okay is not a good strategy to solve those particular problems. So maybe I could turn to open source, and that'll make everything okay. Because those people are really smart. But they're also a little bit mean sometimes. But what is the happy state? What is the state I want to get into when I'm building my Lego pieces, my things with my Legos? Well, we can turn to the happiness flowchart to figure out how to become happy. Are you happy? Yes? Keep doing what you're doing. But if you're not happy, change something. I think that Microsoft has spent a lot of time optimizing for developer productivity dragging a lot of data grids around and showing the Northwind database and saying if you're productive, you'll be happy. But I think that what's happened in the last year or two is we started talking about optimizing for programmer joy and having productivity fall out of that. I'd like to see less Microsoft conferences talk about how productive you are with our Lego pieces and focus more on what Lego is for, having fun. And it's surprising how productive you will be when you have a lot of fun with tools that fit together nicely. So devs really know what they want. They want to get it done. They want to live with themselves. They want to be able to sleep at night. They want to be able to enjoy writing some code. And hopefully they'll feel good about their code, they'll feel good about their libraries, and they'll feel good about Microsoft. So Microsoft has created a lot of cool software lately. You know, actually, that is not a very Metro looking slide. There we go. We've created things like ASP.NET MVC3 with MVC scaffolding, IIS Express, SQL Compact Edition, NuGet, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow in depth. Also, Entity Framework 4.1, what I call the Magic Unicorn Edition, which includes things like Code First. Microsoft has contributed to things like the jQuery templating project with jQuery, as well as data linking and data binding at jQuery. And then we've released Web Matrix, which I'm also going to talk about. These pieces are building on those pieces that we've used before. Entity Framework is built on ADO.NET. Web Matrix is actually built on ASP.NET and things like MVC. Web Matrix is actually kind of MVC without the controllers. And jQuery, of course, building on all of the good stuff that is in JavaScript. These Lego pieces somehow fit right and they feel right. But they're all built on existing things that work really well. Like IIS Express really is the full version of IIS. So let's take a look at some of the things that we've been doing lately and see what productivity can look like. We'll fire up MVC. So we recently released at Mix, if you guys saw the keynote, we showed MVC3 tooling update. So we've added a couple of things to MVC. We'll go and we'll say File, New Project. And we'll say totally awesome or something. And by default, in MVC3, I've got some new choices. I've got Internet application as well as intranet. This intranet one uses Windows authentication. And I think in the coming months, you're going to see us start to fill in this white space with more options, more stuff. You're going to see, hopefully, mobile applications. You'll see some jQuery mobile. You might see internationalized applications that are set up for multilingual. I think that you'll probably see things like accessible websites, things that are appropriate for the blind. This box here, you can actually get in. If you take a look at the Mix site from just a couple of weeks ago, Phil Hack did a talk on MVC, and he talked about you making new projects that will snap in there. One of the new things that we added in MVC3 was this checkbox for using HTML5. By default, with the MVC3 tooling update, all of the templates are HTML5 by default. This MVC tooling update isn't an update to MVC. The system.web.mvc DLLs are the same. You don't have to update your servers. It's only a refresh of the tools that live inside of Visual Studio itself. So this means that you can install this on your developer machines and you don't have to worry about any of the changes on your server side. So I'm going to hit OK. One of the other things that we've been talking a lot about lately is NuGet, the package manager. And I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, but this is absolutely huge. NuGet, I think, is something that is a long time coming. There's been a lot of package managers in a lot of different languages, and .NET people haven't been familiar with things like Ruby Gems and apt-get and Synaptic on Linux. But finally, package management has come to .NET, and it's open source. So NuGet, you can learn about at nuget.org. It's not specific to ASP.NET MVC. You can use it in Silverlight and Windows Phone and whatever makes you happy. You can use it in a console application. It's a tiny little download of about 600K, and it will be an extension to Visual Studio. And it will update itself automatically because it's part of the Extension Manager system. So if I go to Tools, click on Extension Manager, and look at the installed extensions. Here's NuGet, right here. And that adds a menu item here at Add Library Package Reference. So I can add references, or I can add library package references. If I click on Add Library Package Reference and hit on Online, I can go and search for a lot of different choices. Like I could say, are there any HTML5 specific packages? And that's actually using OData to go and talk to the server side and bring stuff down. So here are some HTML5 related community packages from NuGet that I can bring into my system. Now notice this one here that says Modernizer, and there's a checkbox by it. That checkbox indicates that it's already installed. But I said File New Project, and I hit OK. But I already have a package installed. Well, one of the complaints that has come up a lot is that MVC will ship things like jQuery or other libraries, and the day we ship it, a new version of jQuery will come out, or a new version of whatever will come out, and then people will have to go and dig those things out themselves. Well, this new project that I just created, I haven't changed it yet, came with some NuGet packages pre-installed. I can actually look at the packages config file and see that by default, pre-installed is jQuery, jQuery validation, the entity framework, as well as Modernizer. If you're not familiar with Modernizer, it's one of the things that we decided to ship in ASP.NET MVC3. It's an open source library from Paul Irish and some folks at Google. And Modernizer allows you to use HTML5 today on older browsers. So there are HTML5 features that will work in browsers like IE6 or 7 or old versions of Firefox. This means you can use HTML5 now and still support older browsers. So by default, those are installed. I can click and say, here are the installed ones. I can click on Updates, and NuGet is going to automatically go up on the wire and see that I have, I think, 151 installed, but it's noticed that there's an update to jQuery 152. So notice my scripts folder here. I'll go and say updates. I'm going to move this over a little bit. See the right-hand side? So I've just updated my default template from 151 to 152. Now, this includes Entity Framework, which is the Entity Framework code first stuff that just came out. I can go here to Models, and actually let me just run my app to make sure that you know what it looks like. Here I'm running it with the ASP.NET Development Server that you're familiar with already. This is the default template for ASP.NET MVC. But I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to say Use IIS Express, the full version of IIS that I don't have to be an administrator on my box. I'm not running as administrator. Here's IIS Express down here. Here's the port that we're running on. And if I look at the task manager, you see IIS Express is right there. It's not running as a service. And if I decide to kill it, it'll go away, because it's running as a user. It's gone. This is the full version of IIS. This means that your sites will act the same way locally that they do when they're deployed to IIS. This means you can use things like SSL. I've got examples on my blog and in my mixed talk about how you can go over port 80. You can expose it to the outside world. This is great if you have an IT organization that won't let you run IIS or applications as administrator. So now, let's go and create a model here. We'll say add class. Let's see, just do blog. And actually, what I'll do to save time is I'll cheat. And I'll do this. So this is a model, this is a code-first entity framework. The Entity Framework 4.1 came out at Mix. There's 3 ways to make models in the Entity Framework. There's database first, model first, and code first. Each of the 3 of them all use the same entity framework that's underneath. In this example here, I've said public class post, and I've given my post an ID, and I've put a couple of attributes on it. These attributes, like required and string length, are all just standard CLR attributes. They're not specific to MVC3. These are the same ones that you use in Silverlight or in WPF to get validation. And then notice my post has a collection of comments. And comment also has a unique identifier, but then refers back to a post ID. So there's a relationship. Posts have comments, and a comment then has a post ID. Then we create a blog context. At this point, though, I haven't said anything about connection strings. I haven't said anything about my database. I've just started building with these Legos using a format that I'm very familiar with, just writing code. Well, in MVC3 now, I can say add controller. Let me compile first, actually. And we get an all-new controller dialog where I can scaffold out my post controller. If I pull this template area down, notice that we've got choices like empty controller or controller with read-write actions and views using Entity Framework. I can click on that and then select my model class and make a new data context or use an existing one like blog context and hit add and watch the right-hand side in the Solution Explorer. It's actually looking at the posts and the comments, and it's creating a post controller that includes, by default, index, details, create, edit, and delete. Nice and clean. It's also using Razor and HTML5 to go and create the details page and create and things like that, using the new Razor syntax. But I still haven't said anything about a database or anything like that. Let's go and run this application. And let me bring up SQL Management Studio. And let's hit the post controller and see what happens. Is it post or posts? And then right there, a database has appeared automatically with comments and posts. This might not be what you want to happen in production, but the idea is that these things snap together cleanly and you do what's called falling into the pit of success. Should I have to know about the format of a connection string? Should I have to tell it about SQL Server? Should I have to warn it about how I want things done? For quick prototyping, this is an extremely clean way to describe a database. It's code first. It noticed I didn't have a database and it created the database for me, but I could have taken an existing database and created classes that would refer to that database. You have a lot of choices. Like I said, database first, model first, and code first. But notice that it knows enough about my blog posts that I can go and create ones. Oops. One of the things that I forgot actually when I upgraded jQuery was to update my reference. NuGet can't do that by default. And notice that I just hit create there, and I get validation by default. That validation is using jQuery unobtrusive validation. And all of that is being driven off of these attributes. Those attributes in the class are expressed in one place, which is what you would expect, and then pushed into the database as database-specific attributes. The length of the fields in the database are set correctly. Foreign keys are automatically inferred, and that turns into validation code. In the past, that validation code would be pretty gross. Some people called it the view state of MVC because it would include a giant pile of JavaScript at the bottom. Actually, I'll show you what that looks like. If I go to my web config, there's an option here called unobtrusive JavaScript. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and do a view source. And this is why they call it the view state, rather, of MVC, because it's a big JSON array describing all the validation rules that I might need, and it's pretty nasty. It doesn't make for a very pretty-looking site. This markup is clean, and then this pile here. And that's a pile just for 2 or 3 fields. Let me switch that back to true, because that's the default, and do a view source. And look at my markup. It's HTML5. It's using things like header and section, which are all HTML5 semantic tags, legend for forms. And notice these bits in red. All of those were generated from the attributes that were put on the code first model. Again, what you would expect. You're seeing a very subtle interaction of everything working as it should. You've got ASP.NET MVC. You've got Entity Framework code first. I describe the model just in code. I put attributes that we use elsewhere in things like Silverlight and WPF. Those attributes drove down into the database and affected the database's structure. Those attributes presented themselves as markup in the HTML using HTML5 and the data val attributes. The JavaScript is what's called unobtrusive JavaScript, which means that there's nothing here at the bottom. There's actually no script in line on the page anywhere. If I scroll out, that entire page is 75 lines of pretty clean looking markup. All of the input boxes know how to validate themselves. jQuery does all of that work for us. Everything working together as it should. If we go and make some post, some title, some publish date, now all of that was done just by scaffolding within ASP.NET MVC, all using dialog boxes like add library package, and nothing was done at the command line. There's also a command line for NuGet, the package manager. So for example, I could interact with it like this. This is actually PowerShell. I can say things like list package, or is it list package or get package? There we go. Those are the same packages. I could install new packages from the ether. For example, if I wanted to change this, I could say entity framework. I think there's one called SQL Compact. I just hit tab. We'll see if this is actually going to go and load the feed. Oops, I'm on the wrong server. Notice that you can have multiple NuGet servers. I'm going to talk about that in my talk tomorrow, where I talk about NuGet in depth. So I just hit tab, and I'm getting IntelliSense dynamically. So literally this has gone up, populated this list, and brought it down. I could switch over to SQL Compact Edition if I wanted to. Bring that down and any dependencies that it has, and then instead of using SQL Server Express, it'll go and use SQL Compact Edition. SQL Compact Edition was released recently and will give you a nice embedded database with no licensing. I think it's something like a gigabyte of space, and your hoster doesn't have to know about it. So if you have a host that you don't want to pay SQL licensing fees and you have a small application maybe at work, you can use SQL Compact. If you look at the This Developer's Life website, it uses SQL Compact Edition. And even after Mix, when tens of thousands of people hit the site, we used caching and we were smart about our database access, and we had no problem with that site using SQL Compact Edition. Now I can say get package. We can see SQL Server Compact is installed already. I can go and uninstall those packages if I want to. Here are the packages that are already installed. Notice that it popped up a dialog. It was automatically changing my web config for me. NuGet does all of that automatically. So I don't necessarily feel like I'm being kind of compressed and squished by all of these different Microsoft products. They start working together cleanly. I feel like in the last year or two, Lego pieces have snapped together better on the web platform and tools team than ever before. The amount of things that I'm able to do, the amount of flexibility that I have is greater than ever that I've seen. Just in this example, if you think of all of the moving parts that are just working. And the reason that I think they're just working is a couple of things. The team has been more transparent than ever before. They've involved community early on more than ever before. If you went to Mix or you saw any of the Mix talks, you probably saw that we showed more daily builds, private builds, betas to get feedback from the community than ever before. The NuGet project is actually not run by Microsoft, but rather by the Outer Curve Foundation, used to be called the CodePlex Foundation, and has external community members committing code to it. So that means that for the first time, Visual Studio will ship code that came in from the community. I think that it's a small step, but it's an important one, that we're going to start seeing more and more Microsoft projects run as open source. The project does all of its discussions completely in the open. All of the discussions are on CodePlex. You can get involved and you can commit code right away and change the Lego pieces yourself. Things have changed. This is a really great chart that talks about adherence to the rules as it relates to experience. And when you are building up experience and you become a mid-level programmer, you tend to follow the rules. When you're a beginner, you don't know the rules and you learn them. But something happens when you really grow as a community and as a programmer, you start breaking more rules, the more experience that you get. This is one of the great things that Rob Connery has taught me. I spent a lot of time during the early 2000s and the 90s thinking about, Java beans and EJBs and giant multi-tiered architectures and things like that, and making huge over-engineered enterprise applications. And then I go and talk to a team like the guys at Stack Overflow that I spoke to at Mix. Stack Overflow is doing 100 million page views a month on 6 IIS servers. 6. With 9 developers. And I said, how long does it take to compile your application? About 10, 15 seconds. It's clean, it's lightweight, and it uses all these technologies that I'm showing you and more. So what else can we do with an MVC application if we have the right-sized building blocks? Let's go back over to here. So far, we've got our little database and our little blog that we can, create, read, update, and delete. But there's a couple other things I can do. Let's say that I want to get some error handling. Let's go online. I know that one of my favorite tools is Elma. It's one of the greatest things about ASP.NET that no one knows about. It's called Error Logging Modules and Handlers. I'm going to hit Install. Elma has added itself as a reference here, and the package has also manipulated the web config, and it's installed itself in the web config. I'm going to run this, and I'm going to visit some pages that don't exist. So I'm going to cause errors. Okay, so I've caused a bunch of errors, and now I'm going to go and visit elma.axd. And here are some errors that just happened. Elma is handling that. It's literally saving the yellow screen of death for me to refer to later. I can even give me an RSS feed, or email me, or page me, or tweet me, and let me know that errors have happened. It gives me the complete call stack, as well as information about the request and the user's machine and what was going on at the time. It's an amazing piece of software that's actually been around for like 7 years, except it was incredibly hard to configure before, and it required people to go and find it and download it and install it. But now with NuGet, and using standard HTTP modules and HTTP handlers, it plugs into MVC extremely cleanly. So much so that I'd like to see it as a default pre-installed on MVC. And I've said that to the team. I said, well, why don't we make it so when the people say file new project, we include more Legos? And Phil says, well, it's only like 2 clicks away now. We don't need to include it. So that becomes really, really interesting to me, that I can go and assemble my preferred Scott application and set up a file new Scott MVC app with the libraries that I care about. So here I've just added Elma to my little blogging application. One thing that I could potentially do, let's see if I want to add, actually let's try this. We've got a date. See how this published date right here? A blog post has a published date, but when I run the application and hit /post and create a new one, when I click here, there's no calendar. You know, I can kind of mess that up. It's not really a date. If I do a view source and go look at that date, published date, it looks like it's just type equals text. But I know that in HTML5, there's this type equals date, or type equals date time. Except that's only supported in Opera. It's not supported in Chrome, Firefox, or IE, because it's not done yet. But it's really cool, and I want to use it, and it should be done. So I want to use it anyway. I'll go and remind myself that the packages I have installed include Modernizer, and I've got jQuery UI. But I know that there is an HTML5 helper up on NuGet that was written by a community member called MVC HTML5 templates. I'm going to hit install. And then notice a new folder has appeared, just snapped in, with editor templates that say, when you're using a date, use markup like this, or if you're using a phone number, use markup like that. So here I've got an HTML text box, except this one has type equals date. All right? I don't have to change anything. Let's just run our application again. Hit /post. I can see that my box is a little bit big. It's too wide, but I don't see any date pickers showing up. I'll drop into the CSS and look for input. I think it's probably date time. Run my app again. Is it date or date time? There we go. So now it's the right size. Let's see if I have Opera. So here's Opera. Opera, by default, knows that it's a date time and gives me this kind of weird thing. But, you know, good for them for doing that. It's not pretty, but it works. But it doesn't work elsewhere. So I've got a situation now where I'm using HTML5 markup. My input box for publish date is now type date time, except none of the browsers that I use know about it. But I know that I've got Modernizer on my system. And I've also already have installed jQuery and jQuery UI. Those things were included with MVC. So what I'll do is I will start with my layout here, and I'll just bring in the jQuery UI scripts. But you know, I don't even want to do that because I don't necessarily want to load them if I don't need them. I'll probably will need some CSS though for the date picker. And actually, this is a good opportunity to show you that it's not just about JavaScript. I could bring down anything. I know that there's a class called Redmond that's actually just CSS for jQuery. So I can bring down JavaScript, .NET assemblies, things like SQL Compact, or in this case here, just bring down a jQuery UI theme. I've just brought down new CSS, and now it's right there, down here in the corner. So I've got some CSS for a potential date picker. On my blog page, I think it's in, we're doing create. I could add a little jQuery. And what this jQuery says, remembering that I have Modernizer installed, it says, hey, if you don't have a support for the date input type, go and load this script and automatically take anything that's a date time and apply the jQuery datetime picker to it. It's an extremely elegant chunk of code. Let's make sure that our scripts line up. Yep, cool. So now we'll run this. Hit post / create. And now I'm writing HTML5, including parts of HTML5 that aren't really supported yet in most browsers. And it'll automatically, progressively enhance. Modernizer, which ships with MVC and is open source. It's an example of yet another open source library that we're starting to ship with MVC in Visual Studio, is allowing me to do this. And this will actually work even on browsers like IE6, which is both really awesome and extremely sad at the same time. Let me show you what this application would look like in IE6. I'll use Super Preview. And I'm going to fire up my application, and we'll go to, I guess we'll just go to the home page, it's fine. Super Preview recently was updated, and I was not really a big fan of this before, but they have this new remote browsers concept. So I can actually test what my site looks like on a Mac, or weird versions of Firefox or Chrome that are that are elsewhere. So let's take a look at, let's do Safari and IE9. So there's my IE9, and here's the same thing in Safari on a Mac. See, it's a little different here. Let's look at it on IE6. So it looks like crap. So let's go back and let's put back in the Modernizer right there, this script modernizer here. And then we'll go back into Super Preview and hit refresh. And now IE6 looks okay, which again, profoundly sad. So then I'll go to IE6countdown.com, where we count down to the death of IE6. Look at this. These guys in China are killing me. 33% of China uses IE6. And Finland, rock on for the Finns. And the Norwegians are almost done. So I can go down here and grab this banner that will tell people that they suck or that they work for a government agency. And then I'll go back into my application and I'll just drop that in. Return to Super Preview and hit refresh, and then we will tell the IE6 people that they need to stop now. So Modernizer gives them the ability to see the site that they would have if they had a decent browser. Let me show you one more thing that's too amazing not to show you. So far we've used NuGet to get SQL Server Compact, Entity Framework, jQuery. We updated jQuery. We got Modernizer. We used Modernizer. I brought down CSS, CSS themes. I'm pulling all these different Lego pieces. I'm using OData to talk to NuGet. I can do, I'll talk in lots and lots of depth tomorrow morning on NuGet, including the command line, details of PowerShell, and a lot more. But what's an extreme example of something that you could do with NuGet and snapping these pieces together? Let's go and bring up the Package Manager console again, and I'm going to show you something called Glimpse. So I'm going to install this package. Notice that it's saying my web config has been updated because Glimpse has installed some things into my system. And I'll run my application. And suddenly, I've got this box at the bottom here. This is actually jQuery. It looks like Firebug, doesn't it? But that's actually a div. So I can select the text, which is kind of creepy. And look what it's showing. It's showing a glimpse into what's happening. It's Firebug for your server side. It's showing me the indexes that ran. It's showing me the environment. It's showing me assemblies that have been loaded. It's showing me my current config, including connection strings. Information I would ordinarily have to dig around for. My view engines, including Ajax and debugging. It even replaces Phil Hack's routing stuff, which brings up a number of interesting points. Legos and this kind of philosophy of happiness and snapping together things isn't just about snapping things together, but it's also about replacing things that you don't like. While this is an extreme example of modifying an application and making it really fun and easy to debug, Glimpse, routing is an example of something that some people just don't like. For example, when I hit my application and I said /home/about, the routing table is what made that happen. When I said /home/about or /posts/create, this default route sent me to the right controller and the right action. A number of people don't like that piece. They don't like that the routes are centralized, and they want to change that. So there's another great NuGet package called attribute routing. And it's such a great example of a community member not just writing a mean blog post about how they don't like something or how they don't think that something works the way they want it to, but rather talk is cheap, show me the code. So Tim McCall created attribute routing. Just updated my web config, and here's attribute routing right there. So now I can close my global ASAX, let's actually close everything. We'll go over to our home controller. And rather than putting routes over in global ASAX where I can't see them, what if I put them here? On the controller action itself. He's actually put in routes for, he's got get, post, put, all that kind of RESTful stuff. And then in my global ASAX, all I have to do is say routes dot, and I think I have to add his library, because he has an extension method, routes dot map attribute routes. And he will automatically scan all of my assemblies, and then I don't have to do the default routing. I can do it like this, which is totally awesome, I think. It plugged in cleanly with NuGet. And I just mapped. It's totally awesome, isn't it? To index, or I could move it over to about. And now I'm on the about page. Really great example of the community. So I've used attribute routing and MVC HTML5 templates and Glimpse. None of these things created by Microsoft people. All of them great examples of not only snapping new pieces onto my application, but also examples of changing the way that my application fundamentally runs. And it's a reminder, I hope, and my message to you guys is that you are powerful. You can tell us that you don't like something. You can blog about it. You can tell me, and I'll tell Phil or somebody. But ultimately, you have the power to change this stuff, because finally the pieces snap together well enough that you can just change it yourself. You are more than just your job description. And while I appreciate the community members that talk a lot, I really appreciate the community members that do stuff. So organize, make change. Go out there, start using NuGet, check it out, whether you're an MVC programmer or not. There's a Silverlight, lot of Silverlight stuff. There's a lot of WPF stuff. There's a lot of libraries you can use from console applications. Look at what you can do to participate. It might be something simple like updating the NuGet documentation, or it might be something complicated like making your own stuff. If you're going to be at TechEd or you're going to watch the TechEd talks, I'm going to be doing a talk at TechEd called NuGet in the Enterprise. I'll talk a little bit about it at my talk tomorrow, but this is going to show you how you can go and take existing functionality that you have at your work, run an internal NuGet server, and pull that functionality in. So if you're a chief architect or a lead at your work, or maybe you're a junior engineer, you will be able to share pieces of the projects that you've succeeded on with other groups within your own company and replace chunks of code that you don't need. Identify the areas in your application that you can swap out for a NuGet package. Then start packaging these things up yourself. I'll teach you tomorrow morning. And then start sharing them with people. Read more code. Help open source projects in some substantive way. You don't necessarily have to dedicate hours and hours a week to do this kind of stuff. Help Microsoft do the right thing by keeping us honest and making sure that we are listening to you, and tell me if you are not getting the help that you need. And encourage community, encourage new people, write more code, use the right size Lego pieces, and make something beautiful. Thank you very much. My name is Scott Hanselman, and that has been my talk.
Thank you, Scott. All right. I would like to to finish off this great talk. Thank you, Scott, for the photo as well. Go ahead. A few practical details before going on to the rest of the conference, to the sessions. So I mentioned it briefly in the introduction. We have a program that you can download for your Windows phone, or that you can run through a web interface on your iPhone or on another telephone or on a computer, any computer with a web connection. Go to techdays.realdolman.com. They created a great application that allows you to give your feedback real time. It's really to give you like, okay, I like this, I don't like this, I have some comments. You will still do the normal evaluation with all the details per session. So take advantage of this. You will see the screen with the top sessions in the halls. You will also see a Twitter wall also developed by Real Dolman. What I would also like to invite you to is to go meet the local experts and the international experts and the speakers from Microsoft at the Ask the Experts booth. They will be there at every break. They will be there ready to talk to you, to answer your questions, to discuss with you, and go join them. Go join the community, as Scott mentioned. It's important to get that community even bigger, and we have a very active community in Belgium. So please go join our Ask Experts up there. And now for the next sessions. Right after this session, you have a break, and then we start the rest of the conference, the 3-day conference. So because we have 3 main topics, main segments or tracks in this developer part, we have 3 introduction or overview talks to those tracks. So we will have Bart de Smet doing a programming languages trends talk. So go there for a general overview of where we are today in programming languages, what's coming. Then for the behind-the-scenes view of the TechDays live feedback application that Real Dolman made, Martin Baljouw and Kevin Dox will be doing a session that's covering jQuery, web, they're covering ASP.NET MVC, Azure, phone, all the good stuff in one session. You should go check out the session on the TechDays Real Dolman application. And then the third track is around cloud and servers. SharePoint is in there as well. So in this track, Wade Wagner is going to give you a general tour around Windows Azure platform, the whole platform. So these sessions are great to get you into the right track. And then after that, it's all for the rest of the conference, of course, and you switch sessions whenever you like. So I would like to thank our sponsors, thank our experts, thank the speakers, thank you for attending, and go talk to our sponsors in the expo area and enjoy the conference. Have a great 3 days. Thank you very much.